key dates in Orthodox Judaism. We don't have time to do the whole of the Bible story, but after the time of Jesus in the New Testament, around the year 200, and I've used the letters CE because Jewish people do not like the term AD. AD is in the year of the Lord, Anno Domini. CE stands for Common Era, because Jesus is not yet Lord of Jewish people. So around the year 200 CE, around the time that the Gospels, or a bit after the time of the Gospels being put together, the Mishnah was being compiled. Now Mishnah means repeat or repetition. Shana is a year, it repeats itself. And the Mishnah is the repetition of the law. So the law that we have in the first 5 books of the Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, the rabbis take the key laws, traditionally 613 of them, and they put them into a structure which can then be studied and repeated and learnt. Which is why in Jewish life we repeat ourselves. What does Mishnah mean? Repetition, yeah. And the Mishnah was compiled by a rabbi called Judah the Prince, Judah Hanasi, and that became the basis for the next main work, which is called the Talmud. Let's say that together. Talmud, which means teaching. Lamad in Hebrew is to learn. Melamed is a teacher. Talmud is teaching. A disciple is a learner, a talmid. So if you know one Hebrew root, lamad, you know about 30 other words that come from that. Isn't that good? So lamad is to learn, melamed is a teacher, talmid is a student, Talmud is teaching. So the Mishnah is about that thick. Or if you study it properly, about that thick. The Talmud is about that thick. I don't know, maybe they have it here in the library, do you know? It's what every Orthodox Jew should study if they're a man. Women do not have to study it. Some do now, but they don't have to. Ideally, you study 1 page every day. You can get it on your iPhone or you can download it onto your iPad. You study it in Aramaic and Hebrew. You discuss it. You argue with it. After 1 page a day, you get through it all in about 7 years. So it's thousands of pages. And there are actually 2 Talmuds. There is the JT, the Jerusalem Talmud, and the Babylonian Talmud, the BT, which is a bit longer. And the JT, the Jerusalem Talmud, is earlier. Now the Talmud is like a long-running argument. It starts in the middle of something that you don't know what it means, which is what time should you say your morning prayers? Why do we need to know that? Well, it's a good question. And then it goes on for pages and pages, like a table tennis match and a game of chess and a sort of library of discussions, and there's bits of advice on food and medicine and health and how to be a good neighbour, and there's all sorts of discussions. And it never stops. So the rabbis say, find yourself a teacher and find yourself a fellow disciple. And if you've got someone who can teach you, and if you've got someone you can study with, you just get learning. And that's the great joy of studying Talmud. So if I'm on the plane last night, coming back from Tel Aviv, and I'm looking at what everybody's reading, and all the Orthodox Jews are studying Talmud, or they're studying the Torah portion for the week, and the secular Jews are reading their novels and playing on their video games. But what you do is you're always trying to study more. And the Talmud really gives us the framework for Jewish life for Orthodox Jews. And then around the year 1180, a very famous rabbi, Maimonides, let's say that word together, Maimonides, a Sephardi rabbi who lived in Spain and then in North Africa, in Morocco, who was a great philosopher. He took the philosophy of Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, and brought it together with biblical revelation and Jewish tradition, and he gave another version of all this teaching called the Mishneh Torah. Let's say that word together. Mishneh Torah. The repetition of the Torah. Shana, Mishnah, you can see it's the same word. And many Jewish scholars today, or Orthodox Jews, will go to Maimonides, and he is the one person that can claim to have written a creed. Now, we don't really have many creeds in Judaism. We have the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. That's the prayer that you start every morning with and you go to bed every night with. And it's a sort of creed in one verse. The last words you say before you die. The words that you say at every key moment in your life. But what Maimonides did was he tried to say, well, what do Jews really believe? And he broke down the Shema and other passages to come up with a creed. And then the Shulchan Aruch, the prepared table. Shulchan is a table, Aruch is prepared, which means how do you set your table and your life to live according to Orthodox Judaism. So rabbinic Jews will study all these books. We study the Old Testament and then the New Testament, and then if we're very good we'll study Calvin's Institutes and the Westminster Confession and whoever else. Well, Orthodox Jews will study this as also revelation. This is all the oral law. And even today, a rabbi will say, what does the Torah say? They will read what's in the Bible, and they'll then read what's in the oral tradition that's being handed down. There is what we call the sea of halakha. Can you see the picture? You won't see all the details, but right at the top, you've got Moses on Mount Sinai. You see? And Moses receives the law on Mount Sinai and hands it down to Joshua and then the men of Judges in the great synagogue, and it gets to about here, and then the river, if you like, starts growing. You have pairs of people discussing it, and then you get to this thing which is the Mishnah, and then it starts flowing out into the sea of halakha. Halakha is to walk. Halach is to go. So halakha is how do you walk? How do you walk in the ways of the Lord? How do you keep the law? So if I go to my rabbi and say, Rabbi, I want to play golf on Shabbat, on Saturday. I'm not doing any work. I think God's given me the game of golf so that I can enjoy life. And for me, golf is, you know golf? It's like working, it's like worshipping God with my golf club. And the rabbi says, Richard, I'm not so sure. And if he didn't know already, he'd say, let me go and look it up in Maimonides, the Shulchan Aruch. And he would say, come on now, you know that you're doing work, you're traveling, you're not putting God first. And he would be looking at the contemporary sea of halakha. And in fact, wherever there's been Jews, in all the different places they live, they've had schools to help people know how to live. Now, I'm getting quite complicated here, but if you want to understand Orthodox Jews, we have a library of commentaries. We have the Torah Shebiktav, the written law, which is the first 5 books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And then we have sermons that are based on that. But as well as the written law, Torah Shebiktav, we have the Torah Shebe'al Peh, the oral law. This will all be on my website, by the way. You can download and use these PowerPoints for teaching in Sunday school. And send me an email if you have a question. But what the rabbis have done is they've taken both the written law and the oral law, and you see we have Mishnah, Talmud, Yerushalmi, Talmud Bavli, and then it goes from 200 to 200 to 500 to 1000 to 1500 to over after 1500. You have all these traditions of discussing how to live as a Jew. But Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof still doesn't know why you cover your head. So even if you're a good student and you might understand it, most Jewish people probably don't. And you, having done this course at CWI, will probably know more about some things in Jewish law than many Jewish people. So don't worry if you don't know it all. Basic Jewish beliefs, and then I'll stop for questions. There is no official creed, although Maimonides, this medieval rabbi, wrote one, and we do sing it and say it 2 or 3 times a day in synagogue. So Maimonides' 13 Articles of Faith summarizes Orthodox belief, which is basically divided into 3 main groups. God exists. He is eternal, from beginning to end and beyond. He is indivisible, which means no Trinity. No doctrine of the Trinity, according to Maimonides. He is immaterial, which means he has no body. If God has no body, Jesus cannot be the incarnate Son of God. Now, Maimonides is saying this really because he's opposing the philosophy, or he's using the philosophy of Aristotle. But it also affects us when we believe in the Trinity and when we believe that Jesus is truly divine, God in human form. God, that's the first building block of a Jewish theology. The second building block is Torah, the law. But it's law and much, much more. Because many Christians think law bad, grace good. And they set law and grace against each other. But for Jewish people, it's not like that. Grace comes before law. And law is a response from grace. And there is grace in the law, and there is law in grace, which Calvin, I think, would have agreed with as well. But for Jewish people, we want to study the law, how it's revealed, that it's both the written law of the 5 books of Moses and the oral law of Jewish tradition, and it's irreplaceable, which means no New Testament and no Quran, because it's the final immutable revelation of God. So you cannot have a New Testament coming after it. You cannot have a Quran claiming to be the perfect law. So God, Torah, and Israel. And these are the 3 building blocks for doing Jewish theology. And did I mention my book already? I probably did. I use that structure also. So if you want to understand Jewish theology and Christian theology and Messianic Jewish theology, look at it from this structural point of view. Israel, who are the people of God? How are they to be a light to the nations? What is their mission? What is their calling? What is their destiny? How are they to live in the midst of the nations? These are the things that Jewish people think about when they study their own theology, if you like. And then finally, the Messiah. And Maimonides is very clear. I believe in the coming of the Messiah. Even though he delays, I will wait for him. He's trying to do two things. Firstly, he's saying there will be a Messiah. Secondly, he's not yet come, so it wasn't Jesus. It certainly wasn't Muhammad. And I'm going to wait. I'm not going to make it happen. Because in his day, in the Middle Ages, there were many Jewish people rushing to make the Messiah happen. Either a false Messiah, or maybe we can bring the Messiah by doing something. And Maimonides is a rationalist. He says, hold on, it's going to be okay. In the Talmud it says, if someone tells you that the Messiah has come and you are busy planting a tree, finish planting the tree. Don't rush. You will know at the right time. So I think I should pause for some questions. We have 5 minutes for questions. Please, any questions or comments? Yes?
So it is hard for them to believe that Messiah,
It's hard for them to believe
Messiah is God.
that he has come because there's no peace. And one of the things the Messiah will do is bring world peace. It's hard for them to believe that the Messiah is more than a human being, because God does not share his being with another. He does not have a partner. But then, where you have two Jews, you have how many opinions? Many. So there are many different Jewish understandings of the Messiah. Some people say there'll be no Messiah. Some people say there's a Messiah in every generation. Some people say there'll be two Messiahs. Some people say Israel must wait until the Messiah comes when Israel is perfect. Others that the Messiah will only come when Israel is so sinful that God sees the need of the Messiah. This is discussed in the Talmud quite frequently. But for most Jewish people, it is very hard to think of a divine Messiah coming twice. Some would say there'll be two Messiahs, the Messiah son of David and the Messiah son of Joseph. David, like King David, comes as a conquering king. Joseph, like Joseph, who is rejected by his brothers and only reappears at the end to save them, will be rejected and then maybe even resurrected. So there is a lot of messianic speculation. Many Jewish people have a belief in a hidden Messiah. But the majority view is it wasn't Jesus. And we don't know much more than that. And then, as I said, liberal and reform Jews don't really believe in a personal Messiah. They believe in a messianic age where problems will be solved perhaps through our own human perfection, that we have finally solved the problems of world peace. So you ask anybody, that they will have different views on this. And I think you'll have a whole session on this.
Okay.
So
So for the 12 disciples,
yeah.
I think
They didn't realize this at the time. They abandoned him and they were disillusioned. And it wasn't until they met the risen Jesus and he explained the messianic prophecies that they had a new understanding that this was truly God in human form. And even that understanding, what we call a binitarian mutation in their understanding of God, went against some of their previous understandings of monotheism. So in the New Testament, we see a growing awareness of who Jesus is, but it wasn't their original understanding because they thought he might come as a conquering king, and look at him, he's crucified, he's rejected. And until he rises from the dead, they think everything's lost. Yeah. Another question? Yes.
I was interested to note that you mentioned that Maimonides was influenced by Aristotelian.
Yes, there was an anti-Maimonides group who burnt his work. Because what happens, and this is the way Jewish people work, we don't normally write theology. We normally do Bible commentary and then we look at philosophy. And in the Middle Ages, the main challenge for Jews and Christians and Muslims was how do we reconcile the revelation that we have biblically with the new wisdom that's coming from Greek philosophy, because Arab translations of Aristotle and Plato were coming into Europe. and Maimonides in Judaism, Thomas Aquinas in Christianity, and people like Al-Ghazali and Avicenna in Islam were all trying to wrestle with this powerful new philosophy and how it affected their Bible understanding. Yes, the Jewish mystics who practiced Kabbalah. I haven't really mentioned Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism, which is to come to almost like a sort of spiritual enlightenment about God. And then for a Kabbalist, God is not just 3, God is 10. There are 10 parts to the being of God, 10 emanations of God. So you think, why can't Jews believe in the Trinity? And the answer is we believe in 10, some of us. And of course this is mysticism, and it's got some occult teaching in it as well. So you have to be very careful about it. But they would also be against Maimonides. And in fact, you know, this is he's as important as Martin Luther or Thomas Aquinas or someone like that for understanding Christian thought. Yeah. Well, Maimonides was also, this is a whole little seminar on Maimonides here. He was also against the apocalypticists and the messianists. So he's trying to slow people down. In the Middle Ages, both Christians and Jews were full of messianic speculation about the return of Jesus for the Christians or the coming of the Messiah for the Jews. And one of the reasons for the Crusades is that the Christians were very worried that the Jews were going to present their Messiah. So Maimonides is a key figure. Now we're going to stop and have 10 minutes break. Is that right?